Hey, it's Mariloe, and welcome to another episode of Let's Blom, a chilled, safe space where not so chilled conversations happen for a woman by a woman.
Okay, so I'm so keen to introduce today's topic, and I think I'm just already laughing at all of the responses that I've received. I've opened up the floor and I've allowed you to let me know what your red flags are and how they've impacted your life. In addition to that, we've had some men give their commentary on what they think red flags are in women, as well as just a little bit of, a little bit of advice when it comes to these kinds of things. What I did find funny was when I posed the questions, do you have red flags and what are they? A lot of people tend to jump to saying, I see red flags in A, B, C, D, E, instead of internalizing that and saying, what are my red flags? I've even had one say that I don't have any red flags. I think I'm pretty perfect, period. So that's so funny. Let's go right into what you have to say about red flags.
So, by definition, and I mean, we use this term very lightly, red flags, green flags, we see it all over social media, over TikTok, etc. We have them in conversations, we associate them with this is my trigger, this is a red flag. But by definition, red flags in a guy or girl can be signs of narcissism, aggression, victimization, or even abusive behavior. And so, when I say red flags, that is what I mean. Right, so let's jump right into it. Let's hear what the Blom community has to say about their red flag. Alright, so just a disclaimer, some people wanted to remain anonymous, and I completely respect that. And others said, listen, go ahead and throw in my IG, my Facebook, my Twitter, my PayPal. Go ahead and throw all of that in and say my name. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So one of you said, ek het niks red flags nie. Red is my favorite color, so I have none of those negative connotations to it. Kudos to you, mama. Keeping that positive, that perspective in check. Red is her favorite color. Niemand gaan niks sê nie. I wonder if that is a red flag. So I got a couple of more comments that said that they are quite manipulative. I think this was probably the highest amount of comments that I got, that they were like willing to do whatever it is that they needed to do to get their desired result. And one particularly noted, and she's going to remain anonymous, she said, it would take me back to feeling like a small little child that gets caught out every time, because she says that she's an open book and that people can kind of read when she's being, when she lies or she's deceitful in any kind of way. I don't think it's even that malicious. I just think that as human beings, we quite enjoy getting the outcome that we like. But there are also various healthier ways to get a desired outcome, depending, I think, also on the severity of what the situation is. And then if you don't get what you want, you gotta just deal with it. But I find that interesting how, as human beings, we are quite manipulative. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm manipulative. I'm just saying, like, as human beings. Like, we're not talking about my red flag, yeah, okay? That's just on the note of there were so many comments about being manipulative. That's it. That's it, okay? This one literally like had me falling like apart. So Andy goes ahead and says, so she goes onto this diet, right? She's very serious about her goals. She knows that she wants to stay on track. She wants to lose weight. She wants to feel good. The vibes. And she says the minute she feels less bloated, like she feels like she kind of lost some weight or something, she's like, okay, I've got to reward myself. Maybe I should have a burger. I don't like, hi, nee man. You can eat so aangaan. But then on the other hand, I'm like, girl, if you're doing good and you feel like you want to reward yourself, go ahead and eat that burger. Like, what? Imagine doing well and then not treating yourself. On a serious note, one of you said, I have a bad relationship with my parents. And as a result of this, it makes me suspicious of the people who like me instantly. well, that's definitely something that is good to be aware of. And I guess the fact that you can name it means that you can work on it. I hope that you don't stop really good relationships from happening to you just because you're suspicious of people. And I also do hope that you get to remedy your relationship with your parents. One of the beautiful sisters in the community said that she's extremely stubborn, and as a result of that, she has been put in a place romantically quite often. I think I resonate with that. I think there's this idea where she discusses in a voice note that we as single moms, as single parents, have had to play such tough roles, and we've had to become so manly in our womanness that we seem to not be able to relinquish the idea or even just try to perceive that we can be soft in relationships because we've had to be hard for such a long time. It's not that we don't want to be soft, we really do, but we need these, strong men to sort of hold us and lead us. So we're not opposed to the submissiveness. It's just that we're very, very nitpicky and we're open to debate, and we get into it, and that gets us into a little bit of a tricky situation when it comes to the opposite sex. Speaking of the opposite sex, a friend of mine, also one of the community members of the Blom podcast, says that she sees red flags as those little alarming signs, those signs that say, pay attention, have a look at this, pay attention to this. So I think in a way it makes something pop up that you should pay attention to, and if you're willing to work on it, work on it. If you're not willing to work on it, then I guess let it go. I don't know. I'm not a relationship expert advice. I'm merely just saying what you're saying. So here's the deal, right? This is the same person that misread what are your red flags, and she immediately went to relationship like, okay, if I see a red flag in someone, it's probably something that I've got to like be alarmed, work on. So she was taking it in that context. And so I was like, sis, what is your red flag? And she was like, I want to be liked by everyone. And I think that's a tricky kind of thing, because if you don't like you, like who's going to want to hang out with you? Who's going to want to like you? This constant need that we need to be liked, accepted, and validated isn't something that's new to us. Like, I think we learned that from a very early age on, like what are outcasts and what does it feel like to be bullied? What does it feel like to be, certain people have experienced that. And so I think maybe that if you sit with yourself and you kind of get to a point where you're like, you know what, I'm gonna get good with me first, and then I'm actually not gonna give a single hoot about what anybody else has to say, think, feel about me, because you ain't paying nothing. You know what I mean? Like, we get so concerned about people being like liking us that we forget that some of them have no level of investment in our lives. When I heard myself saying that and I played that back, I was like, that high-pitched voice. I think it's because I resonate with it, and it's very difficult for us to say that, like, it's okay. You don't have to like me. It's fine. It's all right. I will deal. But I think because of the nature of the kind of work that I'm in as well, there's obviously the tendency of choose me, pick me. I can be the best character. I can do the work. I can do that. And I think probably the tendency to be liked is rooted in the fact that, like, the type of work that it is that I have to do. So I'm working on it, and I hope that you're working on it too. But yes, let's carry on. Someone texted me saying, yeah, I do have them. Just give me some time. Give me a little bit of time before I share them with you. So I'm probably going to share them a little later on. I find it so interesting that red flags can be such a vulnerable conversation, and at the same time, like, other people can point out other red flags so easily. Like, I've got someone on my list, he's a guy, and he mentioned some of the red flags that women have. And when I asked him in turn, can you share your red flags? The person then retorted and said, well, that's a little bit vulnerable for me. I'm not sharing that with you. Isn't that interesting? Here's one of them. So, red flags in a woman, as he notes, is being mean-spirited, being contentious, and women who think being a woman is a bad thing. And I really resonate with that. And I think that ties back into the point of us having to be strong for ourselves and all of the things that we've had to endure. And also just how the feminism wave has made us feel like we can do all things that men can do. So therefore, and thus, we are manly, you know. I think that there's a serious issue when it comes to that. I think that being a woman is a beautiful thing, and women who have an issue with being a woman should definitely have a look at that. I think I was one of them. I think I had a look at it. I've reevaluated it. There's some things that I've fallen back on. Some things where I'm like, I'm not fighting this. This is not my place. I'm not doing this. This is not my battle. And there are some things that I'm just not willing to let go of. There's just some points that I'm not, because I think that's closely linked to then being the independent woman, which I think is a scam, which is a conversation for another day. I have a really good friend of mine, and I asked him, I said, so what do we do when we like identify these red flags? So he says to me, most of us are aware of our shortcomings, which are our red flags. Some that we know are wrong, and others that we don't believe are wrong, and we would probably stick by them. So the best thing to do is to identify where these habits come from and why you act a certain way, because all of these habits stem from somewhere. And once you can identify its source, it should make it easier to start working on fixing the red flag because you're going to the root of it. And at the end of the day, the only way to fix it is to firstly wanting to actively change it. Because if you're not willing to accept it, that you're not perfect and that you need to change for the better, nothing will ever get done. And then, of course, proceeds to say, I'm so glad I could be of service. Oh, what a man thing to say. Oh, love you to death. Thank you so much for that advice. I absolutely couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. Here are some more red flags that you noted. Before we get to the green stuff, the good stuff, the growing stuff, the glowing stuff. Because we have to end this off on a high. We can't be talking about the negative parts of us and not talk about what it is that we're willing to do to change these bad traits that we have. Here's another one. Jealousy. She says that her red flag is jealousy. So she gets jealous in relationships, overly possessive, and she says it comes from a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-worth. And I find it so interesting that a lot of people who have responded is people who have really beautiful traits, and for the fact that they're able to identify these things makes it so lovely to engage with them, because when we ended up having obviously continuous conversation about it, and it just came down to building that level of awareness of this is my red flags, and I'm actively trying to change and have the opposite response to what my natural or innate response is, which kind of comes back to what my friend said about identifying the source and then saying, there you are, you little sneaky, and tackling that and uprooting that and planting something positive in that. In the next section, I'm going to be noting some really great green flags, some to replace some of the red flags that we have been experiencing. Oh, also, I haven't told you what mine is. We'll get into that in a second. I think it's only fair that I share my red flag. So my red flag is I'm controlling. Yes, I sometimes would like to say that I'm assertive. I know the difference between being assertive and being controlling. I am so controlling to the point where I want to control the narrative. I want to control how you respond. And if you don't respond accordingly, I throw my toys out of the cot. And I know this about myself. And I know that I don't want to do it. But there's just something inside of me that just immediately, automatically reacts. And that's where I end up. That's my flop. And I'm aware of it. And I'm gonna start working. I'm gonna start working on it. I can't be ruining relationships for the sake of being in control. It's a whole bunch of crazy. So here's another one. Hannah takes the stage, says that my red flag is that when I'm hurt, I will say anything to make the other person feel as sore as I do. And this is how it's impacted my relationships. It has impacted it a lot because I realized that I was actively doing it. And I just blurted out whatever I could to hurt the other person in the relationship. And it caused a lot of strain on said relationships. Now that I know that this is a thing that I do, I tend to want to do, I make myself stop, before I actually hurt someone else. And that's a great level of awareness to know that when you have that urge that arises, that you stop yourself from, inflicting any kind of hurt that you are feeling onto the other person, which is very much rooted in a level of forgiveness. So kudos to you. Hannah takes the stage. Mia says that her red flag is that she's dismissive and controlling. Here's another controlling one. But this story is a little bit different. She says, I grew up in a household where I was exposed to drug addicts that mentally and emotionally manipulated my grandparents. Now, no one wants to see that. I started speaking up and standing up, and that's when the problem started. It became hostile when I became the issue, trying to defend them from what I saw was wrong. And I was either too manly or crazy for standing chest to chest with a man. Sort of seen like a damsel in distress that can't do anything to stand guard. That caused me to retreat, have my guard up, and never allowed myself to be placed in a position to seem weak. It challenged me once I started noticing that those patterns, once I became serious in our relationships, I felt like I needed to be in control when I see issues arise, leaving me vulnerable, to be within my masculine energy and wanting to lead my own satisfaction, which went hand in hand with being dismissive when arguments and problems surface. She then closes off to say it's been a wholesome experience to notice the patterns and to become more expressive with my emotions and not feel the need to always want to dominate how something plays out. Mia also has something that she's going to be coming out with, so I hope to hear from you with what it is that you have to say, elaborating on this experience. All my love to you, darling. Another one noted that self-sabotage with a crying emoji. I can only imagine how that has impacted your life. On to some lighter stuff. Gabriel says that I'm just too lazy for a relationship. And then James Sully says, falling in love with a lady like you. Come on, James, just love on the show. Just show us some love. That's all we need. Another person said, absolutely nothing. They just shared the page. So I hope you deal with your red flags. And then lastly, Sinatemba says, I'm clingy, and then says AF. So he's really, really, really clingy. Sinatemba says, please share my information. So I'm going to go ahead and say it. Sinatemba Sakati Mhlokoti. And I practiced that. And I did the best that I could. Okay? There's no coming back from saying someone's name so wrong. I apologize. Teach me how to do it. Okay, so all of these responses have come from Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp messages, and I really enjoy reading them. I just absolutely love that you respond to these questions that I ask, that I will continuously ask, because there's a lot of conversations that I would love for us to talk about. I think girls and guys, we got together and we spoke about something that we commonly experience. So thank you to everybody that responded. We obviously absolutely love to learn, but most importantly in all of it is the unlearning of bad habits that we have sort of collected as we started growing up. So here we go, for our holistic life, for the self-sabotage stop, because essentially red flags in ourselves is the self-sabotage of the highest versions of that, what we can possibly be, achieve, do, So let's go into them green flags and rephrasing what it is that is bad in us. When we say bad, we say we accept the shadow versions of us. We notice them, but we also don't give rise to power in them. And we operate from a place of health, green, growth, flowers, trees, goodness. Let's get into it. I'm getting a bit carried away now. So all of what I said was literally just derived from some of the conversations or in fact notes that you have sent me, messages that you've sent me. I phrased these green flags. I am good company for myself. I like and love spending time with me and those around me who love me. I practice gratitude out loud and innerly. I think before I speak. I think before I decide. I think of the best version of me before I make a choice. I only need the approval of myself and what the word of the Lord says about me. Oh, and I like shining a light on my friends' victories and wins. I am overly protective. I am protective and I am protected. When I tune into the Blom podcast every week on Wednesday for a treat of wholesomeness, I had to say it with some green and grits. Y'all gonna have to forgive me. When I say I don't know who this person is talking over here, but listen to her because she seemed to have some good advice. Hey, I'm just gonna go ahead and let her do in other news. In other news, musically, Caphonic Records in France has released an EP called Mama. All right, this EP is by Ecstasy. The remix is done by Edward, and this little songwriter, singer, I don't know how, Mariloe is doing the song. So go ahead and listen to that if you like Afro tech, if you like deep house music. Go ahead and listen to that. Also, girl,
she
let me
says-
stop you right there because honestly speaking, practice your links first before you come and do links on Let's Blom. Let me do the rest of the other news. In other news, my Yane remix is coming out with Luke on Friday. And there are a couple of other remixes that will be following that. I would strongly ask you to support me on Bandcamp. Open up an account, it's free. And I'm hosting a live event for songwriting and recording in a session. And I'll let you know when that date is. And I'm really, really, really excited about that. So that's about it for in other news, musically. You know what I always say in all of my podcasts, stay kind to your mind, stay soft with yourself. And in closing, it is hard. It's so hard to say goodbye. Had to add that in. It was such a good time to spend with you. I hope you tune into the next podcast. We're going to be talking about relationships, green flags in relationships, and I'm going to bring on a really special guest to help me unpack that. Bye-bye.